Minister. Deputy David Cullinane, then, please.
I first of all want to thank the chairperson of the Joint Committee on Jobs, Enterprise and Innovation for her work, and also the diligence of all of the members of the committee for the work that they have put into examining this bill over the course of a number of months. I think it's fair to say that Seachta Butler probably mentioned my name more times in the last half an hour than she did since she came into the chamber, but absolutely. I also said when I moved this bill that I wasn't perfect, Ceann Comhairle. It might be a surprise to you that I have imperfections, and I also said that this bill is not perfect, and the bill has imperfections. And like any bill sponsored by an opposition party, where we don't have the team of civil servants that governments and ministers have, there will be flaws and there will be problems with the bill. However, despite the lack of support from your party, Minister, where not only did you disagree with the bill, you lambasted the bill and my party for bringing forward this bill. Other people supported it, and it did go to the Joint Oireachtas Committee for scrutiny. You whistle a different tune here today, but at the time when this bill was first moved, you and some of your ministerial colleagues were very strident in your criticism of me personally and my party for bringing forward a bill that was attempting to address a real problem. That's why I want to thank the committee members for the work that they have done, because what they have done is spend 13 hours over 6 sessions, heard from 45 witnesses and made 23 recommendations. And I support every single recommendation because they strengthen the bill. Some of the recommendations I don't necessarily agree with. Deputy Butler talked about the look-back period, which in the Joint Committee's recommendation is 12 months. You're saying 18 months. I was saying 9 months. We consulted with the trade unions that represent low-paid workers, that represent those workers who are on if and when contracts, and they're telling us that 18 months is far too long. They also believe that 12 months is too long, but they could possibly live with it. And I would as well if it meant progressing all of this. What you have done, of course, Minister, is after lambasting Sinn Féin for bringing forward a bill to deal with what is a very real issue, you then had to play catch-up, and you now bring forward a bill of your own. And far from your bill being more practical, as you put it, and more balanced, in reality, your bill is much more limited in its scope and what it intends to do than the bill as amended if we were to accept all of the amendments from the committee. And your bill is balanced not in favour of workers, it's balanced in favour of the employers. In fact, I bet could have written your entire speech for you today, Minister, because many of the criticisms in this speech were similar criticisms I heard from IBEC when they were before the committee. You talked about the Sinn Féin bill being limited in its response to regulating precarious work, even of all of the amendments. Well, there's one issue where we do agree, because of course it is limited in regulating precarious work. There is an awful lot that we need to do in this area. What this bill was intending to do was deal with one specific problem, and we never pretended the bill was a panacea to all of the problems in relation to precarious work. What it's intended to do was to make sure that an employee has a contract reflective of the hours that they do. And that's its simple purpose, that was its core purpose. And I'm happy and pleased that, at least in principle, the government now agree that that needs to be done. You then say, Minister, that your bill is more comprehensive and balanced. Well, maybe you might be able to spell out to me how it's more comprehensive. What additionality does your bill bring to the table? What does it do that the Sinn Féin bill and the bill now as amended, if it was amended by the committee, do that our bill does not do? All it does is it broadens the look-back period, and it has bigger bands rather than tighter bands that we wanted. In fact, it doesn't solve the problem at all. In launching all of this, of course, the Minister says, and announced this with great fanfare, that the government bill was going to ban zero-hour contracts. And this is part of the pretends that we get from this government as well. It's a bit like what's happening in housing at the moment, where you pretend that you're doing something that you're not. First of all, your bill as is proposed, your own bill does not ban zero-hour contracts. And you've already acknowledged there are certain exemptions. Secondly, the Limerick study, the University of Limerick study, acknowledged that the issue was not zero-hour contracts. They weren't looking for banning zero-hour contracts. In fact, they say zero-hour contracts is not the issue. It's if and when contracts, it's low-hour contracts, and it's regulating those contracts. That's what needed to be done, and that's where the focus needed to be. You lauded a number of times, Minister, the University of Limerick report. You do know that the Sinn Féin bill took many of the recommendations from that report. So you can't, on the one hand, attack Sinn Féin for what you say is a fatally flawed bill and not getting it right, and then commend the authors of a report that make exactly the same recommendations. They recommended the 6-month look-back period, not Sinn Féin. We accepted what was in the report that your government actually commissioned. So I'm afraid, Minister, your bill does not solve the problem at all. You're going to pretend that it bans zero-hour contracts, which it does not. The bans are going to be too broad, which means it won't have any significant impact on those who are victims of this. And you quite rightly in your speech identified a problem, which is what you're very good at and your government is very good at. You will tell us what the problem is, and then you tell us, here's the solution over here, and it isn't a solution at all. Because one of the problems you identified, that because of the low hours that these workers are on, and we know that many of these workers work for 30, 40 hours a week consistently over maybe a 5, 10, even 20-year period, and yet their contracts are still 15-year contracts. And that because of that, when they go for a mortgage or a loan in the credit union, when they have to produce evidence of their contract, they are then prohibited from or unable to get a mortgage. You're absolutely right in that. But your bans are too broad, and it's not going to solve that problem for those workers. I met with the Mandate Trade Union, who represent the vast majority of these workers, and they don't believe that your bill will do the job. In fact, John Douglas from Mandate on Morning Ireland says that the government bill does not do what it says on the tin, and he could not have put it any better or any more frankly. So it's quite obvious to me, Minister, that your government is not really interested in addressing this problem. I want to at least acknowledge that you have come some way from being almost viciously opposed to even the concept of this bill when it was moved by me and my party last year, to at least acknowledging that now something has to be done. You gave my bill, I think it was an F, when we brought it forward. I'm afraid, Minister, yours wouldn't even register an NG, because it's just not going to solve the problem at all. I do want to commend Dr. Daly for her support, and I know she has pushed this in the Business Committee to allow this report to be even debated here today. I want to commend Dr. Collins as well for support that he has given in the committee. I want to commend Dr. Quinlan and also the other Dr. Collins as well for her support, and my Sinn Féin colleagues. There are people in this House that do want to see this issue resolved, and they did put an awful lot of diligent work into this. So I suppose what I'll say is this: notwithstanding Fine Gael's view, notwithstanding your view, notwithstanding your government's view, we will have a bill. We will have an opportunity to amend the bill. We will put forward amendments. We will take many of the recommendations that are in the Joint Oireachtas Committee report, use those amendments to try and at least make your bill somewhat presentable, somewhat logical, somewhat practical, so that it can go some way in dealing with the problems. But I'm afraid we have to wait, Minister, until there's a Sinn Féin government and a Sinn Féin minister sitting in your seat before we see any justice for workers and any justice for those who are on low and if and when contracts in this state, because they most certainly won't get it from a Fine Gael minister. Gurmag.